Hey everybody, my name is Mike at Filmboy24. If you can't tell by looking at all this stuff sitting in front of me, today is 8mm day. Again, B8L, D8L, and a roll of film. Yep, it is another 8mm episode. You see, I'm kind of hooked on 8mm now. If you followed my channel for a few videos anyway, you'll see that I just tested some 8mm not too long ago, and I hooked myself. Woo! And I'm a pretty good catch. Anyway, I dug out some old cameras that I had laying around. My wife actually bought this one for a birthday of mine about maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and it never really ran right. I just thought it was a gorgeous camera. This is a B8L camera, 2-lens turret, and this one I bought online. I honestly don't remember. I have so many cameras. I'm going to guess probably 5 to 6 years ago. And it's a D8L, a 3-lens turret camera. Neither one of these cameras worked a couple days ago. And when I say they didn't work, well, they wound up and they ran, but they did the classic at every speed, except for really low speeds where they just didn't work at all. They would give you that humming that you know, the motor was fighting and fighting and fighting to turn. So I finally decided I have nothing to lose. Let's take them both apart. And I took them completely apart. And as you can see from the photos here, I got pretty deep into these cameras. I put some oil in the proper spots. I put a tiny bit of grease at the claw pivot area and put them back together, and they both run like Forrest. You see, I film at 24 frames a second, not 16 like a lot of people do with 8, and I may experiment a little with 16, but that's 24 frames per second on my B8L. Here's 24 frames per second on my D8L. I know you can hear that. I'm right next to the microphone. I was elated. The only thing I did not do, the viewfinder on my B8L is nice and clear and got a tiny bit of dust and whatnot, but the viewfinder on my D8L camera here, it's very fuzzy and it really needs a good disassemble and clean and get all the parts of the viewfinder cleaned up. I did not do that. That's coming soon. I wish I would have, because it's really a pain trying to look through a viewfinder that's nice and foggy and cloudy. It's kind of like, yeah, it's just like that. Oh, yeah, I cleaned it. For each camera, I do have a hand grip. These come in handy. Now, as you can see, when the camera has the pull-down release on the side, I don't know if you can see that. I'll try to get a zoomed-in shot. The release, the shutter release here is you pull down, spring-loaded pull-down on the side. On the D8L, it's a push-in on the side. So the handles are a little bit different. The handle for the push-in on the side is actually much more ergonomic, and it's a pull trigger, like a little pistol, because it pulls this little pin here. It pushes the pin in and it pushes the release button. On this one, they couldn't really do that because you can't. You got to somehow pull down, and if you pull this way, it doesn't really pull down. Blah, blah, blah. So what they did is they devised this handle, which you actually pull down. You don't pull in, so it's a little funky trying to do it because it's just not a natural movement. But it does pull the release, the shutter release, straight down. Better than not having any type of handle whatsoever. I did put both of these handles on and I used them for my test. So my test, what did I do? I did exactly what I did for my magazine camera test, and if you haven't seen that, take a look at it. I'll put a little link up here somewhere, or if it doesn't show up, just look a couple of videos ago. And I took a roll of this FPP BW 100 speed film, which is a black and white negative film. This is a 100-foot roll. I spooled down this 100-foot roll into a few different uses. Like for this, these are little 25-foot spools here that fit inside these little Bolex cameras, like so. See the little reel down here? That reel is on the take-up side. That's where your empty reel goes. This is where you settle down. this is where your feed spool goes up here. I hope I'm pointing to the right spot. So I spooled 25 feet. Actually, it became closer to 30 feet, I found out when I scanned it, of film from here onto here, emulsion in, loaded up this B8L, put the handle on, took it out to my favorite testing spot, which is about 4 steps out of my back door into my backyard, and went to work. Now my thought was that I would run the 25, 30 feet first through this camera, flip the spool, run the second 25 feet through my D8L, my 3-lens turret camera. And that's exactly what I did. And I filmed, you know, just some boring stuff. Everybody knows if you watch my videos, I have a swing set in my backyard. I have some trees, some flowers, some bushes, and some sky. That's my backyard. So anyway, it seemed to work fine. The loading seemed to go well. The only issue that I found, which was a big issue, was that my D8L camera, for some reason, it didn't feel like the film was seated in the gate properly. And these are very simple cameras to load. Now, I did take this apart. I have a feeling it got, I don't know, somehow popped out of the gate area. I honestly don't know how. There's a switch here in them. When you pull this switch back, it opens the pressure plate and allows you to put your film in front of the pressure plate or behind the gate, or however you look at it. And then you just close it back up and it tightens your film or keeps your film against the gate. So it's funny because at times it ran fine. When I looked at the final footage, there are times when the footage looks pretty decent, but there are a lot of times when it flutters really bad. And I know that flutter because it's happened to me before, where the film unseats or it isn't pulling properly through the gate, and it gives you that sort of that vibrating footage, that fluttered footage look. It's awful and it's unusable. I'll show you what I mean really quick about the fluttered, because I'm not going to show you in the finished results, but let me show you what I'm talking about. You see what I mean? You know, that little bit of footage is all you need to know, and I'm sure most of you that are familiar with that type of footage are fully aware of what happened. Anyway, I successfully shot this roll. Here it is, sliced in half, spliced together on this now 50-foot roll of 8mm. I did figure one thing out that I hadn't figured out in my 8mm magazine test. I figured I would do it eventually, but I did try scanning the film natively in its 16mm width with my MovieStuff Retro Scan Universal Mark I unit, and it was a success. Yes, you can scan 8mm film without slicing it in the retro scan. You use the 16mm setting. It counts the perfs twice. So I scanned 25 feet, well, 30 feet. The scanner showed me that I scanned 60 feet because it's counting double perfs, and I guess that's how it counts how many feet you scan. But it did come out. Take a peek really quick, because I did slice the film, but here's the just a very quick look, and I didn't do a lot of grading or everything. Very quick look at the double scan. So it did a pretty good job. I'm happy about that. Don't know if I'm going to do it every time. It is a neat look, but let's move on. So a couple of quick things that I learned during this process. If you, again, I hate to keep referring back to my old magazine 8mm video, but if you watched it, you noticed that I had a vertical scratch on the right side of the film, all the way down for the most part. There was a couple times where you didn't see it. I did figure out it is being created by my little I don't know how to pronounce that, film slitter. You see, you have to use this little film slitter, or one similar to it, to feed your 16mm wide film in. You pull it, and it slices it into two 8mm wide pieces of film. Well, this is scratching my film, so I will be ordering a new one, probably one of those little round ones, to find out. Keep that in mind when you watch the finished footage here in just a second. There is a vertical scratch. Doesn't seem quite as pronounced as my last one. There is a vertical scratch. That's going to be solved. The exposure was off a little here and there. This is all manual stuff. I don't use the built-in meters on these cameras. I metered everything manually, so keep that in mind when you watch the footage. And all of this film is shot at 24 frames per second, scanned in 2K, and it's been rendered down a few times. Keep in mind that when I render these videos at 30 frames per second, which is what I'm shooting at right now, this video that you are watching, it's tough when you render 30 frames per second and 24 frames per second. Frames blend a little bit, so you may see a little frame blending. Not my fault. Anyway, take a peek at the results. Again, I'm cutting out the fluttery parts. It's going to be most of the film, or, you know, a lot of it. Here's my results. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I have a little bit of work to do to these cameras to make them Filmboy24 primos. I used 5 lenses in these tests. This camera here has, now I have a bunch of lenses. Here's a couple of examples of 5.5. I have this Wolensack 12.5 millimeter, and I have 3 lenses on here and 3 on here. So I picked 5 that I thought would be fun to use, including this 36 millimeter f1.28 and this 13 millimeter f1.9 on my B8L camera. And on my D8L camera, something kind of similar. I have my 36 millimeter, but it's an f1.8 lens. I also have a 5.5 millimeter lens, f1.9, similar to this one down here. And lastly, I have this 12.5 millimeter f1.5 lens on this camera. Processing. I processed this film in the recommended D96 stock at about 67.5 degrees Fahrenheit. I rinsed in plain water. I then fixed it for 6 minutes in Kodak, standard Kodak powdered fixer at about the same temp, 68 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I know a lot of countries use Celsius. In the US, we do use Celsius, but not nearly as much as we use Fahrenheit. It's a weird word. No rim jet on this. So we skipped that process. I then did a little photo flow and some distilled water, hung it to dry, and that's my process. And I hope you enjoyed this, because I sure as, I'm going to say it, hell did. Sorry, Mom. And if you like videos like this, do me a huge, huge, huge solid. Snap punch that like button without breaking your screen. Subscribe, leave me a comment, tell me what you think. Do you use these little Bolex 8mm cameras? I do. I'm going to continue, and I love them. And until the very next time that I see every single one of you people, I point a lot. Stop it. I'll see you all in the next go around.